Good morning, everyone. It is a blessing to be here. It is early in the morning on the West Coast, so I have my cohort in wisdom, Blaine Bartlett, the double B, BlaineBartlett.com here with me. Welcome, Blaine.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here always.
We do so many of these. I'm losing track how many hundreds of these we've done, and I think we're almost at exactly 500 of them, not counting the TV show, which we bang out 72 in a very short amount of time. Which we'll be blessed to have you here next week filming with me at the Wynn. Anyone out there wants to stop by, we'll be in the lobby of the Wynn at our studio right by the buffet, so you can get something to eat and then come and say hi. We got books for you and a lot of fun people. Today we have Jim Quick and I think Chris Gardner, Austin Eckler, some really cool people. But speaking of cool people, there's just a few people out there that'll wake up. Everybody wants to come to the Wynn, but very few people will wake up this early. And Scott Agnew is one of them, and talk about leadership. And I guess what a great way to be a leader, to actually wake up early to help other people. Scott, welcome to Office Hours.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And it's interesting because your book is where I think there's the most interference, not just in leadership, but in behavior. And it's becoming more and more difficult. It was difficult enough when we were young, us three, I mean, to think in the long term. And there's three characteristics of energy that make it difficult that I'm studying every day, and Blaine's mentoring me. But one is the aggregation of energy. It takes time for energy to aggregate and attract upon itself. Two is the compounding effect of energy. And this is especially true with money. And you're one of the leaders in Keller Williams, so you know how the long-term effect or compounding of energy works within that context, as well as a community working there as well. But also acceleration. So the dichotomy, or to me, the counterintuitive thought of energy is that it actually comes faster when we understand what you call long-term. And so I want to start with, where or how has the epiphany of long-term leadership to overcome this interference that, especially young people today, they just can't even think or fathom things in the long term.
Well, I appreciate the synopsis, and I love the way you've crystallized energy and the 3 points of energy, because that's really it. Being in the long term means that you're going to be around for a while. You're not going to just be short term in it. And when you long term it, you get on the other side of all your struggles. The longer you can stay in the game, because after all, business, and this, I mean, with your background, business is it's like a hurricane sometimes, and you get blown around and you have to scratch and claw. And I think a lot of leaders, what they do is they default to pushing harder, talking louder, being more forceful, and it's counterintuitive, right? That's the time to be calm. That's the time to stay in a good place with yourself. That's the time to really raise your frequency, right? To raise your energy and come from a place about them, not about what you need or what you're not getting, but what is it that they need that I can, maybe just strike a little spark, or maybe just give them a little insight. It doesn't have to be, it can be a little thing, And I think it's in those little things that we have the most potency at times as a leader.
Well, it speaks directly to the aggregation of energy, and it's around those little things. There's a story, and it's not so much a story as much as it is a truism. But the English Tour de France team had never placed in the history of the Tour de France, and they got a new coach, and just really truncate this story, but essentially what he started doing was, we've already achieved it. It being the win. We've already achieved it. It just hasn't happened yet. So now we're going to do what needs to be done to make it happen. And that what it needs to be done to make it happen had nothing to do with timelines. It's out there. It's already achieved. Everybody knows that, that goal is out there. And What we need to do now are the small things. Yeah. Where's your foot in the stirrup? How are you sitting in the saddle?
Yeah.
And focusing on what you might call the fundamentals, but it was more than the fundamentals. It was about a process of mastering the small moment in service of that. Yeah, it's already happened. Vision out there. It's not quarterly, which is where most business leaders get in big trouble. Where did you come into this realization, Scott, that this long-term play is actually the way to win in the short-term frame?
Well, it's everywhere around us. Look at Warren Buffett's advice on investing. What does he say? You're in for the long term, right? Profitability is about retaining your talent. It's not about churning your people. It's not about having to hire and train over and over and over again. You see long-term thinking out there all the time. The idea that you have to grasp at something to get an immediate result takes you out of your energy field, as you would say. And I kind of label it as you push and as you try harder for good reasons. A lot of leaders have great reasons. They're very good-hearted human beings, but because of how they show up, they shoot themselves in the foot not because they don't have great intention, it's because they don't know how to express themselves. They don't know how to ask for what they want in a manner where the person on the other end would lay on a sword to do it for them a lot of times. And so I see young short-term leaders are, if the goals aren't being met, they might start out by saying, guys, we're behind. And what they hear is, I'm behind because of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I just think that's a very ineffective and unhealthy way to approach it.
Absolutely. It's that effect of looking for what we don't have and then getting more of what we don't have.
Yeah.
You're also I love in the book, the most important thing I think as a takeaway as a leader is engagement. Blaine and I often talk about the productivity that we could have in America alone if we could increase engagement, which is at an all-time low. There's many polls that Blaine has researched for us. It's extraordinary. What were the percentage of Gallup, for example, in employee engagement?
87% of the workforce globally is disengaged in some fashion from their work process. 87%. That hasn't changed in 25 years.
It's amazing because I teach in sales training, getting people to call you back, because it has, if you get twice as many people to call you back, you'll sell twice as much without getting to be better. But the irony is you'll get better at selling by getting more at bats. The same thing holds true of engagement. And, there are key reasons why this percentage is so high, but especially in your space and especially understanding long-term leadership. What are some of the key tips that you are giving to help leaders engage their people? It's like having Tom Brady not playing, it's like, great. You got Tom Brady on your team, but he's not in. What good is he? How can you get as a leader your Tom Brady's to start throwing touchdown passes?
Well, I think the first thing is, everybody has a bad day, right? And it's pretty easy to lead your team when everything's going right. My father-in-law, who's a retired brigadier general, taught me this. He said, when things are going right, anybody can probably lead that or manage that situation. But when things go south, how do you show up as the real true leader who lets their players know that it's a bump in the road, and that little bump in the road isn't going to feel like a bump in the road to the person you're talking to. I believe, in my experience, if you go in and go for the jugular, I've seen coaches, start yelling at their players.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that a lot. And I don't know I guess some players respond to that, but in this day and age, in the modern world, you're not dealing with professional elite athletes all the time. You're dealing with normal people who need to feel like it's safe to make a mistake, right? And it's not a repetitive mistake over and over. And then you've got the wrong person. But, every once in a while, even Brady throws an interception, right? and you go up to him and you say, Tom, this is what I'd do. I'd go, Tom, you want to talk about that for a second? And he might say, no, get the hell out of here, coach. I know what I did. Leave me alone. And at that caliber, I'd say, all right, you got it. You got it figured out. And holding people capable in their moments of setback, letting them know that you believe in them, all that kind of stuff, I think goes a long way for you to stay in the leadership game a long time, because then people feel protected because they know you kind of got their back. And when they feel protected, then they're going to be more engaged. And when they're more engaged as a leader, when you do give them, a direction or a guidance, moment or coaching moment, they're more likely to listen to you. They're more likely to take it to heart. And so I think that's a good place to come from. Ask if you want to talk about it. Be requestive, not directive. You know what I mean? Like, and come from a place of, curiosity and let's work through this together kind of thing. But still hold them accountable. Don't let them off the hook.
Yeah.
But, let them know you expect results.
I just have to interject, Blaine, real quick.
Yeah.
I think everyone go back and listen to this if you're a parent, because holding your children capable is a huge parenting, to me, tip that I see so many parents aren't holding their children capable or even accountable, but that's brilliant. Anyway, sorry for that, Blake. Go ahead.
Oh, that's exactly the point I was going to make.
I stole his thunder again. Why would you want to co-host the show with me if I keep doing this shit? I'm so sorry.
Because I love you. It's because I love you. But really, that distinction between holding somebody capable and holding somebody accountable, I can't hold them accountable unless I think that they're capable. So I want to get the horse in front of the cart. And the idea here has to do with the nature of conversations that leaders have energetically. If I'm holding somebody accountable, there's an energetic dynamic that is uplifting, that kind of comes with that mindset. Holding them accountable, there's always the danger that I'm going to be sending a message that something is broken, and that something is usually the person, not the process. So where this goes to, Scott, and I just want to check this out with you, because I'm getting this experience from you directly here. Conversations take two directions. One's an upward spiral. The other one's a downward spiral. Conversations around what's working, it's already here. It just hasn't arrived. The obstacle is the way. Celebrate this obstacle, because we wouldn't be in the path unless we were on the path. These conversations are upward in generation. Oh my God, this is horrible. This obstacle, God, this problem, downward spiral. Who's to blame? Who screwed up?
Yeah. Well, and actually, most business interactions have a downward spiral with the intention of being an upward spiral.
Right.
Okay. They go. The leader goes in. I read an article about the percentage of business interactions. It's an astounding number. It's like 85% of every business interaction, the accountability session, the goal setting session, whatever it is, end up where the protege or the employee or the partner walks away feeling worse.
Yeah. Hence the 87% disconnection from work. I mean, it's not an accident.
Yeah. I mean, why meet if it's going to go down, right? Let's meet and let's knock all the air out of the balloon. Great. What a great session this is going to be, right?
Oh shit! I got to come in. I can't tell you. I do 3 meetings virtually with my entire team, and Monday and Fridays are training and longer. Wednesday's a touch base. But I would say my biggest frustration as a leader is I go in with the upward spiraling attention and intention, and I know when I'm not an effective leader because I have just sucked the air out of my entire company. With good intention, and I have to make that a definite reminder of why I'm there, and to be able to do that. Now, next time that we have you on, because we got to have you back, and we have other shows as well. Scott, I want to talk about another issue, which is, what do we do with someone that isn't capable, and especially in your profession, right? You have a more open source of building a team.
Sure.
And so we do get to a point where, hey, these are the same mistakes again and again, and we can't get somebody engaged, and we don't have the power to change someone. They have the power to change themselves. So I just want your promise, one, that you'll come back at least on another show or this show, and then we could talk about what to do in that situation, because with 87% disengaged, we have to figure out a way to either utilize, fall away, or fire. And I'd love to have that conversation if you won't mind.
Sure. And that's why you hold people accountable, right? Because you want to evaluate their performance rather than judging them as a person, right? You want to separate those things.
And sometimes they make it impossible to do so. But Scott Agnew, if you want to be a leader, if you want to be an intelligent follower, and you want to be able to aggregate, a compound, and accelerate your team, long-term leader is a great source to learn effortlessly how we can do so. Thanks for joining us so early. We look forward to doing more with you and having more conversations. What a delight. Thank you.
Feelings mutual. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
We spiraled up in this interview. Thank you. All right.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, one of my favorite old school bands was KC and the Sunshine Band. And what a perfect person to have here, because talk about KC and the Sunshine. Look at that smile. And she is brightening our early morning. Kim KC Campbell. And she is a colonel, retired, and in the U.S. Air Force, and also an author. First, Casey, I am always amiss. Thank you so much for your service. I get choked up. I live such a blessed life, but I've been luckily involved in our different services. And I can't tell you, for those people that don't recognize or aren't aware of how great this country is, with options, opportunities, and touches of favor. If you have nothing, you could be a farmer from Oregon or live in the projects in Akron, Ohio, and you can end up living better than the kings lived hundreds of years ago because of people like you, Kim. So I just wanted to make sure that I always thank you, because I just love my life, and if it wasn't for people like you, I would not have that opportunity.
Thank you.
Anyway, to that measure, welcome to Office Hours.
Thanks for having me.
And fear is one of my favorite things to talk about and not to live in.
Yes.
It's the greatest interference. And I have categorized two types of fear: fear of the past, which usually manifests itself in some subcategory of guilt or regret. And then, of course, the fear of the future, which is always an anxiety-based subcategorized fear. And nobody knows fear better than our Air Force pilots and flyers, because they get both. And there's plenty of things and reasons why. So I want to talk about first your perspective, or your participation in that perspective of fear, as an expert in fear and writing a book about how to face fear, flying in the face of fear. What is your perception of fear, and how do you categorize it in your mindset?
Yeah, it's interesting, because in my early days, right, my young fighter pilot, new fighter pilot, especially being one of the only women, fear was this thing that I didn't want to admit. I didn't want to talk about it. We didn't talk about it. It was just like, we're supposed to be invincible. We're supposed to be fearless. And then we went to combat. I went to Iraq very early as a young wingman. And when we start talking about not bringing everyone home, we now always kind of start talking about the concerns that we have and the fears that we have. But it was hard to admit. And I find that today, right? It's hard to admit when we're scared or worried or anxious about something, because we feel like it might make us weak. But what I've realized kind of in this reflection of 20 plus years of service is that there were many, many times in my life when I felt fear, whether I was walking up the ramp to attend basic cadet training, whether I was walking into my fighter squadron on day one, knowing that I was going to be the only female fighter pilot, whether, something with my family of my husband deploying and now I'm home with 2 kids, or even leading a team and, taking that first step of being a leader. There's some sense of fear, because it's fear of the unknown. It's fear of not meeting expectations. And what I've realized in all of those things, like, the fear is not what matters. It's what you do in that moment. Can you take that next step? Can you continue on? And so that's the thing that really I'm trying to normalize and talk about, is that those feelings are okay, but you have to be able to do something with it.
It's interesting, Kim. And again, I'm going to echo what David has said. Thank you for your service. You're not talking theoretical here. I mean, you won the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism.
Mhm.
So, there's substance behind what you speak of here. And I want to just check something out with you. And this is my experience with fear. As long as I'm not talking about it, as long as I'm just kind of it's held inside, it feels as if it's part of me.
Mhm.
And that's the debilitating nature of it. It's so pervasive. By talking about it, by recognizing it, by acknowledging it, by labeling it, it moves it from inside to outside me. And if it's outside me and labeled, it's not me. It's just an artifact. And once it's out there and it's not me, it frees me up to be responsive, not reactive in the moment. Is that a good kind of forensic analysis of what happens here?
Yes, I think that's very much so, because what I've realized over time is that I would feel these, I would feel it inside. I would feel worried, and I would almost be like ashamed of it. Like, why am I feeling this way? I have the training, I should be good. And it was just kind of taking some time to like acknowledge, okay, what is going on? Why am I feeling this way? And just to like say, all right, I feel worried or scared. Not everybody likes the word fear, but I feel nervous about this situation. Okay, now that I've just acknowledged it, now I can do something with it. For me, when I start feeling that way, and I still feel that way today. I mean, I'm not talking about just fighter jets, over Baghdad or something like that, because I think fear is a very normal reaction. And it's fear of maybe some guilt from the past. It's fear of unknown, fear of change, all of those things. And when I start feeling that little sense, I can feel it coming on, like something is not right. I will acknowledge it, just kind of say, all right, here's how I'm feeling, but then I want to do something with it. Now I'm going to take the time to walk through. Usually for me, it's something that's coming up. And then I want to take the time to really think through it. So whatever the situation is, I'm going to prepare for it. I'm going to walk through everything that I can do. And then I'm going to actually do some visualization. And things I've learned from flying is that we used to visualize before every mission.
Yep.
We'd actually paste a picture of the cockpit on the wall, and we'd sit in our chair and pretend we were flying. But, in the normal everyday sense, I can sit in my car as I'm driving and just, walk through a conversation. And then I like to take it that step further, because I think sometimes this is where the fear comes in, is I start planning for contingencies. Like, what are those things that could go wrong? I might as well acknowledge those worst case scenarios, and then have a plan to deal with it. And then for me, once I've done that, I can let it go. And then I'm, yes, there might be a little bit of nerves or worry about it, but now the fear for me, I don't want to say it's gone, it's suppressed, right? I know I can deal with it. I know I can face it because I've put in the work, I've put in the time, and I know in that moment I can step up and take action.
I love that. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah.
I can
Kim,
talk to you forever, Kim.
Yeah, me too. Well, we may, but it's okay. So, I break things down because I do study fear, and I think being able to teach people a practice of identifying fear and then understanding, getting ourselves at center. I call the stop, drop, and roll, right? When we're in fear and anxiety, our mind, body, soul are on fire. So what do you do when you're on fire? You stop, breathe, drop, and then roll in a trajectory that you want to be in, not one you don't want to be in. But there's 3 concentric circles, and I think it's important because I think you can help teach people how to stay in what I call the learning zone. And there it is arbitrary and capricious what the fear is. When you're 4 years old and you think the boogeyman is in the closet, I promise you that fear is as real as probably you felt flying over Baghdad, because that's where your anxiety zone was. So today, so many people want to live just in this comfort zone, and then the next concentric circle is a learning zone, and then we have the anxiety zone. How can we teach people because you have, these lessons of leading with courage, how can we teach people to stay in the learning zone so that eventually the learning zone becomes their comfort zone, their old anxiety becomes their learning zone, and they keep expanding instead of today, because of depression, anxiety, and suicide, I've seen people that were extremely capable live in the anxiety zone too long, and all of a sudden can't get out of bed because literally they're as afraid of getting out of bed at 50 years old as you were flying over Baghdad. How can we help people with that learning zone?
That's a great question. I think one of the things in my final job in the Air Force, I was the director at the Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Air Force Academy. And our mission there was to develop leaders of character. And part of that is our leader of character framework, which was this idea of living honorably, lifting others, and elevating performance. So when we lift others, if we take kind of the center piece of this, when we lift others, there's this idea that we want to encourage people to do well. We want to hold people accountable. But part of that is own our own development, engage, have these meaningful opportunities for engagement, and practice it, right? Take the time to practice. So that's where I think we can push ourselves. And part of this is it is always nice to have a coach or a mentor, a teammate, somebody that can help push you, because we tend to get comfortable where we are, right? We get comfortable in just everyday lives and what we're doing. It seems to work, but you're not really going to ever take it to that next level if you don't get in that learning zone. And so it's this idea of constant and continuous learning, no matter what stage of your career you're at. You could be starting out, or you could be very experienced. There's always there is always room to learn and grow. So part of that is having that person on your team, or having a mentor, having a coach that can help push you a little bit to that comfort, or, outside the comfort zone into that learning zone, to help, give you that courage to do it. But part of it is on yourself. You've got to take ownership for your own learning and your own engagement. You got to get out there and do it if you really want to excel. We did that in a fighter squadron all the time. We pushed each other because there's healthy competition where you're kind of watching other people and they're doing well. They're pushing themselves, they're studying, they're trying new things. And so we did that very well for each other. The thing for me that I think really helps is sometimes that the idea of doing something new is scary, right? It's this idea of you might fail, you might make mistakes. So what we did in a fighter squadron to help us was we always had a debrief after every mission. Mm-hmm. And the idea of the debrief was, one, we did talk about what we did well so we could repeat it. But then we also talked about the things we didn't do so well, right? Those mistakes we made. And what we looked at it is just, let's find the root cause. Let's drill down into what is the root cause of the mistake? What are the lessons learned? And what will we do differently the next time? And so now those mistakes, we're just looking at them as learning opportunities. So I think, to me, that's part of it, is how do people react when we try something new? We make mistakes and we fail. How do we look at that as an opportunity to fail forward, to learn from that? But the short answer to your question is, it takes courage to do new things. It takes courage to get into that learning zone.
Yeah. Being a learner, particularly for an adult, is really one of the most difficult things I've seen people take on. Being a new learner, because it implies, there's an interesting distinction between becoming better and becoming different. Yeah. The learning, putting myself in that learning zone ultimately sets me up to be different eventually. I mean, it's the caterpillar going through the chrysalis stage into the butterfly. It's not a better caterpillar. It's different.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where people miss the mark a lot, because most people just want to be a better version of themselves. And that's why I like, the idea of living honorably as the first pillar in the three-part, piece that you struck out there. I want to just check this out with you, if I could, Casey.
Yeah.
The idea of honor has to do with, and I'm putting this in this term, living in the context of, here's the way I'm thinking about this. Business and leadership becomes a spiritual discipline. And I mean spiritual, not in a religious sense, but spirit intends tapping into that source of aliveness and creativity. And living honorably is not about just doing the right things. It's about making very tough decisions that are connected to something very profound. And it's usually an ideal. In the academy and in the work that you did with the character leaders, or the leadership process there, what was that ideal? And I've got a hunch what it is, but how did you install that that connection to ideal and honor?
So the whole idea of living honorably first is, you're looking inside internally at yourself, and are you acting with honor? But like you said, it's not just about doing the right thing. I mean, there is the integrity piece to it, but there is a list of values that we look to help people to understand and be able to take in internally, not just being told, but to take it in internally. So things like trust and accountability, being able to make hard decisions, being able to make decisions when you don't have perfect information. It's that idea of courage, it's discipline, it's teamwork, it's all of those things. When we talk about living honorably, we're really looking at being our best selves in that moment.
Good. And the book comes out March 8th.
It does.
And I want to specifically, because I do have 3 daughters, one son who's only 12, but even to the extent that we still call them wingmen and airmen, part of the leadership in flying to face of fear, and as a fighter pilot yourself, given the lessons of leading with courage, we still have to have and empower women as leaders to have the courage to break through just some subtleties, unintentional unlearnings, as I say, as much as Warren, as much as Blaine and I, Freudian slip, as much as Blaine and I have, the greatest intentions, as white middle-aged men, we have a lot to unlearn still, because it was many years of reading airmen and wingmen. And so I want to encourage everyone, men and women, to read this book coming out March 8th. They can get it everywhere. They can pre-purchase it. Go ahead, everyone. Casey, please come back as well. This has been a great day of leadership, and we appreciate not only everything you've done for our country, but everything that you're doing now off of the plane in order to empower others with freedom of mindset. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Amazing leaders today. Great lessons. All right, Blaine, I saved a little bit of time today. I could have put a third person on in, but I needed a mentoring session myself. So I thought we could have a little discourse and have people get some insight on what an extraordinary mentor you are. And I want to start with mentorship as, the brands keep growing and the demands keep growing because the brands keep growing. And I don't think people understand the size, scope, and scale of opportunity and audience today. And I believe that, with a greater community comes greater opportunity. And yet the greater the opportunity with the greater the community, mentorship is very necessary. And, we both mentor thousands of people, but I still need mentorship. And so I want to start there about, why, no matter where you are in your life, it's so important to have people that are coaching, teaching, and mentoring you. And 2, how do we choose that person specific to the individual, customized to the objectives or trajectory of that individual?
Wow. Well, first of all, the why question, I think, and I love that question. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question by various clients and whatnot. First of all, I want to make a distinction between coaching and mentoring. Yeah, coaching, there's the relational dynamic is a little different than it is with a mentoring relationship. And the mentoring in the coaching relationship, and I love the way that Scott actually put this. The coach holds the person capable. Yeah, it's innate in them. What you want to achieve out there resides in you already. It's just a matter of in the coaching conversation.
Let me interrupt too. Like, I love the saying, coaches bring the best out of you.
Yeah,
right.
Literally,
right.
Yeah, and that's what the coach's job is. It's not to tell you what to do. It's to have you discover that it's in here and then learn how to leverage it most effectively, because then you own it. It becomes now part of your repertoire. A mentor is a little bit different in that context of development and success, in the sense that if you've chosen wisely, they have already walked a path very similar to the one that you are currently walking or will soon be walking. So they've got some experience, and they've got, not in the specifics, but in the general lay of the land. They're going to say, Yeah, okay, the elevation is going to get a little steep here. Just given what I know about where we're going, that's going to get steep. It's going to call on some things here that you may not be comfortable bringing out. I mean, that sort of stuff. It's kind of marking out the territory, flagging something out here that you want to pay attention to, because if you don't want to pay attention, it's going to bite you in the ass probably. And yeah, the mentor has paid, in your words, the mentor has paid the dummy tax, and now you're reaping the benefit from that.
Yeah. And giving directions on how to get to where that mentor already is, where a coach doesn't have to necessarily even be as good as you or know as much as you. They just are able to bring out the best in you. And then the more difficult thing too is teaching, which requires extreme knowledge to be able to meet somewhere where they're at and take hyper complex understanding of something and then walk someone through getting them to that hyper complex understanding, the subtleties of the secrets that exist when you either have repetition, consistency, persistency, or just passion and love towards something where it reveals those secrets to us. And in the respect though, there's so many different mentors out there. And one of the frustrating things I have with social media, as I look at the size of the community creates unbelievable opportunity, is it also creates confusion. And we see this in the news, but I see it in coaching, mentorship, and teaching that, there's a bunch of, 19-year-olds standing in front of cars they don't own and houses they're leasing. Yeah. And, they call themselves a life coach. Now, they may be a great social media ad spend coach, because it's very possible that a 19-year-old knows far more than a 72-year-old about social media ad spend. And they could be an expert and a mentor, but they shouldn't stand in front of cars they don't own and houses they don't own talking about the billions of dollars that they make and call themselves a life coach, and then have people realize, because they just don't have the situational knowledge to mentor someone. I don't care who you are at 19, unless you're, mentoring about what it is to be 19 and the skills, knowledge, and desire you have. It just blows my mind. How can people vet a mentor? We've never discussed this, right? Because, there is a vetting process, because not every mentor is meant for you.
Perfect. Part of it is going to be chemistry, because you want to be able to resonate with the person that you're working with. And this goes on both sides. I mean, if I've got a mentor and they don't, gel with me, in their mind, I may think they walk on water, but if they're kind of going, and it's not about my capability or anything else, it's just kind of like, we don't connect here. Maybe not a good fit. And that goes both ways. But to your point here, the braggadocio, the bravado, the flash, the sizzle, almost always is a red flag for me.
Me too.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, if I've got to try that hard to get your attention, I'm probably having you attend to the wrong things. So, I mean, Marshall Goldsmith is a good example of this for me. Yeah, Marshall is probably the best known coach on the planet. He's extraordinary at what he does, and there's not a lot of flash. It's just, I'm here, and it's just kind of, there's a humility, and I think that would be one mark of a great mentor, is there is humility, and that makes a big difference. They don't brag about what they've done. They'll answer what they've done. But more importantly, let the results speak for themselves. The people that they've actually worked with, because all of us check out. I've had mentors. I have a mentor today. A couple of them. But I'll check out the references, and I don't mean get a CV and check the references, but just anecdotally, what do people say about this person? What's the story about this person? Is there substance in the story about the person, who they are, what they're up to, what kind of a person they are? Yeah,
I'm blessed to have you and Marshall Goldsmith as two of my mentors. So, not just to give that credibility to who those people are, like you and Marshall, just thousands of people are empowered and impactful. And there is substance to it. Last question real quick is the reverse. There are a lot of mentors that watch this show. There's a lot of coaches and teachers and people who want to be coaches, teachers, and mentors that watch this show. One of the most difficult things, as you have mentored me to be a mentor, and I remember years and years ago having, our first mission meeting, and you were just guiding me about how I didn't even know what one was, but these kids, when I got off stage, wanted me to mentor them, and you were trying to teach me what that was like. But I think the most difficult thing I have as a mentor is the rejection part. Right. And it's, you could work with someone for years and, the season is over for whatever reason. And then you have sometimes the season's over because you're not providing value. And sometimes they're not ready for you to provide value anymore. They got some other things prioritized in their lives. But I would say for me to not take it personally, right. As we met, and, I'm blessed like you to have a wait list of people now. It's not a matter of, like when you start mentoring, you're like, oh no, I just lost my only client. That's a different kind of hurt, right?
Yeah.
But this is like 5-year-old, you hurt my feelings. And I still get it, and every time I have to take a little bit of time to process it and say, okay, this is not about you. And you just do your best, learn lessons, and have fun. How have you been able to detach yourself from, it is a very personal business.
It is.
And, I see it in athletics when someone says, hey, you're not good enough to play for the team and you're off the team. It's not the money. Most of the times the athletes, it's like literally.
Ooh, that hurts.
Exactly. How as a mentor, do you not carry that hurt forward or an insecurity forward that can carry over to your other clients?
There's two ways that I actually deal with that. One is I really do in my bones get that everything is about relationship. It's all relationship. Now, what's interesting about that is it's not all about a single form of relationship. So, you're in my life forever. Whether I am, and I mean, it's just the way it is. The form of our relationship will evolve over time, the form of it. And that form may include a mentoring component. And there will be a time where, from a form perspective, something has shifted and mentoring does not, take the forefront. It may still kind of lurk a little bit in the background, but the relationship remains intact. That's an important piece to understand. And in my experience has been when somebody's in the way that you're describing it, says, okay, I can't mentor you anymore. I'm just kind of, we're done. People go, oh my God, the relationship's over. Well, relationship's not over. The relationship form has shifted. Now I get to make a choice about, okay, how do we next relate? How do we continue relating, going forward? And there's always going to be value in there if there's been a foundation that's been built in. And that, now I may not, the frequency, that's part of the form change. The frequency will change. That can, maybe we touch base once a year, instead of once a month, that kind of thing. And the other thing is, this is how I live my life. There's nobody and no thing out there except me. So if that thing out there represented by, the person I'm mentoring is beginning to change and shift, it's actually a change and shift that's going on with me. So I actually can kind of celebrate it because there's been a growth that's occurred in me, such that I don't need the symbol out there any longer to actually remind me about me. It's kind of like, one and done here sort of a thing. I can move and not feel attached to it any longer.
I love that. And one of the things, that I'm getting greater clarity on in being able to articulate it to people is, I've made this mistake, and most people have in their life, if not all, that just because I feel something doesn't mean you feel it. Personally or professionally. And it's amazing, especially as you become a leader of a lot of people. You might come off of a vacation or something and you're feeling anxious and behind, and all of a sudden you project that onto your entire team, right? Meanwhile, you've been on vacation in Hawaii and they're all engaged, all the things that you want them to be. And now, like Scott mentioned to start with, you're spiraling everybody because you think everybody feels the way you feel. You feel the way you feel. And I love that as a lesson. And we could finish on that real quickly. Takeaway of the day. I know I'm going to get to see you next week in Las Vegas. Make sure everybody swings by Las Vegas. The studio's right by the buffet. We'll be filming all day, Thursday, Friday this week, Thursday, Friday next week. We'll have books there and pictures and fun. But being a celebrant, what can we celebrate from our two extraordinary guests today as a takeaway?
I love the distinction that Scott made, and I think it was appropriate for what KC was talking about too. Holding people capable as the beginning place. Yeah, capability, not versus accountability, but capability is the leading component to being able to hold people accountable. Because if I don't think that they're capable, I've got no justification for holding them accountable.
Yeah, that one was a huge one, obviously, as I stole your thunder earlier. So now you can steal my takeaway. But I'll go on the other side then with KC, which was identifying and utilizing fear. That, fear is subjective in its nature. And although you may not be afraid of spiders, somebody else may be.
Yeah, and it's real.
And it's real. Yeah, right. Fear is real. And they should spell interference with an FEAR, because that makes more sense, because nothing will interfere with your trajectory of what you think you want, your potential, than fear itself. So if we learn to identify the fear and utilize it, either to get us up and get us started, or back up and back started, or to get us out of our own way so that we can get there. That was my takeaway for the day. I am so excited about getting to see you next week. Yeah. So excited that you're here early in the morning. It's just, to me, such an honor. And I appreciate it. Adds value to my life every time you show up, and you show up for so many people. BlaineBartlett.com, one of the world's greatest mentors. Not for everyone, but almost. BlaineBartlett.com. Reach out to him. Thanks so much.
Thanks, buddy. I'll see you next week.
See you in a week.
Have a great filming session.
I will. Office hours, we're getting there. Thank you.
Hey, tell Jimmy hi for me.
Oh, I will. I had dinner with him last night too, but I will. And he asked about you and Cynthia and the charity. So he's a very gracious guy.
Oh, so, I love it.
Thank you, man. Take care.
You bet.
All righty, everyone. Please join us, like I said, if you're in Vegas. And if you're not, if you'd like my book, like Scott Agnew, and I'm blessed that he's going to read it, David@dmeltzer.com. I'll sign my book, send it to you, pay for shipping in the book. I even offered a tie yesterday for people. I have all my leftover ties. So if you need a tie, make that a request too. I got like 1,000 ties I'll never wear again. I'm giving those away with the book. It's a bookmark. And I'll sign the tie too. Trust me. You can wear that on the inside. David@dmeltzer.com. Most importantly, everyone, be more interested than interesting. Be kind to your future self. Do good deeds. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.